Good morning, Don. Nice to see you. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Laurie Barkman. I'm the CEO of SmallDotBig. And the reason why we're here today, one of the things to talk about and I want to share with you is I help entrepreneurs, CEOs, business owners have the business and life that they envision. And I think the journey of owning a business is a bit like gardening. And I would say for me, I'm a novice gardener. There's a lot of variables. There's a lot of things to work out. And I keep a scorecard annually. I live in a state that has a pretty short growing season. My competition's pretty fierce. I would say at this point, the groundhogs are definitely in the lead, followed by the deer, then the chipmunks, and I'm in last place. And why? Why is this so hard? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One, I'm busy, and I just haven't figured out yet how to maximize my assets, whether it's the dirt, whether it's the weather, whether it's the water, and definitely my competition keeps outsmarting me. So how does that relate to today? I'm going to share my slides with you, pull them up here in a moment. So just give me a second, please. So Debbie, thank you very much. Okay, so what is holding back my success? How does that relate to today's presentation? Well, I think there's a lot of things that can be holding us back. And then the key is figuring out what those are. What are those unhidden, or what are those hidden things that we just don't know about? What are those things that as we are striving to grow, we're striving for more, we're striving for that happiness in our business and our life? What are those things that we maybe are not seeing? And that's one of the reasons why I started my firm. I work with business owners to help them achieve their goal, ultimately to have more freedom, to have more control of their time, and to have more happiness in their life. And as business owners, why did we start a business in the first place? For a lot of people, it's that freedom. And regardless of whether you are the founder of your business or if you are in a family business and a next generation entrepreneur, you might be feeling that this is something to work on. I think it's about how do we transition an asset of value? And so back to this point of freedom, ultimately as an owner, it's exciting to own a business or to be a business owner. And those two things are different. Is your business running you or are you running your business? So at some point we reach that opportunity to say, well, maybe I want to do something different. Maybe I need to be thinking about this differently. And so this ultimate freedom comes when we have a valuable company. Because when we have a valuable company, we have options. And so I think it's important for business owners, especially small business owners, let's say $1 million plus in revenue, to be able to punch above your weight class. If you aim to sell your company one day and you're sitting across the table from private equity firm or strategic buyer, this is probably not their first time at the rodeo, but it might be yours. And so they're skilled negotiators. They know what to do. They might be using some tactics against you that you might not be aware of. So again, I think whether you want to sell, whether you want to pass the company down to the next generation, to family, or to the next generation of leaders, or just put your feet up and be board chair, it's important to look at what are those factors that might be holding you back. So when I work with clients, one of the things I like to talk about in terms of my process and my philosophy is this quote from Steve Jobs. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots somehow will connect in your future. Now there's a lot there, so we'll just let that sink in for a moment. Now I like what he's written, but I have one caveat to it, and that's the word trust, because I believe that hope is not a strategy, and trusting in your future is not necessarily a strategy. You have to have a plan. And for many business owners, creating a company that can thrive without you one day is the biggest factor can be one of the bigger factors of value, creating that value. And we need a plan. A lot of business owners do not have a plan. More than 50% of business owners do not have a succession plan, a written formalized succession plan. Many business owners do not have strategic plans. So there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of things to do to get ready. And you say, well, I'm not ready yet. And that's certainly understandable. But today's presentation will help you understand why the planning process and getting started sooner makes good economic sense. So one of the things I wanted to start off with and share with you is some data. So I have some data from the Value Builder system. My proprietary process includes this platform, which is used by more than 55,000 companies around the world. And what we see on average across all industries and companies of different sizes is that the average multiple is about 3.5, 3.5 times pre-tax profit. And so when we ask them to complete this questionnaire, which is a pretty comprehensive questionnaire, but it doesn't take too long, they complete this questionnaire, they get a score back from a point score of up to 100 points. So the average builder score, Value Builder score, is about 59 out of 100. And when companies are really working on the things that move the needle to create value in their business, and they get scores up in the 90s, they're doubling their value. And that's really an important point, is sometimes we think we're moving the needle to move the value, but we're really not. So what are some of those factors? Well, certainly you might say, well, what are some of the reasons that we're getting higher offers? Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. The other thing I want to share with you is not only are you getting a higher multiple, but you're also getting more offers. So these can be things that are coming in inbound. Sometimes companies look to be sold and they work with intermediaries and they go on the market. Other times people come to you. And so we also see that in the data that there's a significant difference. The higher the Value Builder score, the more offers that are coming in. So in the terms of the different types of companies that I work with and other certified value builders, people who are advisors, who do we work with? Well, one category of people are ready to sell now. Now, this is really less common. And for me personally, I like to focus on the second and third categories because I really am into this idea of building value over time. So if you're an owner who wants to increase company value and continue to run your business for 5, 10 years or longer, that's an exciting opportunity because, again, it's an investment to see this value of your company grow. The third category are people who want to run their business, but more step back, maybe move more into that chairman role and start to really enjoy some of the fruits of their labor, but from more of a distance. Perhaps you're working 80 hours a week right now, and whether you're in category 2 or 3, my process of working with you would be to help you, scale back your time, because essentially a company that can thrive without its owner is worth more. And we'll dig into that more in a moment. So drivers of company value. What are those drivers? Well, certainly one of the big things that makes your company valuable to an acquirer is size. Let's just start with that. So companies that are larger do have higher multiples. On average, what we see in our process is an overall average of around 3.6, 3.7. And companies that are less than $1 million in revenue annually are going to be the lowest. Now, why is that? Well, because those companies haven't yet proved themselves to a potential acquirer that they have that sustainable growth and the wind underneath their wings. And as you can see, as this chart shows you with the 10 million plus, that's really a key threshold for some intermediaries and buyers to see that difference, that you've really got that annual sales momentum with the company's progress. So if we go back to the question of what drives the business value, certainly size is one of them. Now, industry is another factor. We see different multiples across different industries. Again, if we think of our average of about 3.6, 3.7, what this shows is manufacturing can have a higher multiple, followed by maybe professional services, you can see in the 4s, and real estate and transportation and warehousing, construction, and so on. But then there at the bottom, we have administrative support waste management at a 1.8. So you might be thinking, oh, good, I'm glad I'm not in that category. That's at the bottom. Well, this is Jill. Jill had a company called Ruby Receptionists. She sold her $11 million company for $38 million, $39 million. Jill's company, Ruby Receptionists, and maybe you've heard of them on radio or the commercials that they do. Ruby Receptionists is for small businesses, dentist office, where you always want the phone to be answered. You don't want the customer experience to go to voicemail. And so what she created was a proprietary network of people who would answer the phone on behalf of clients around the world, any time of day. And her proprietary process, the value of her process became really what got her valuation. Because at $11 million, let's just say her pre-tax income was 10%. So that would be $1 million. And if we looked at our chart, we would say, oh, well, her valuation would be 1.8. So we would value her company about a 1.8 million. But she sold it for an exorbitant amount. So what was some of that difference? Well, there must be something more than just industry and size. And there is. And one of those key drivers is recurring revenue. Companies with more than 75% of their total revenue recurring, meaning it's coming in on a predictable basis, on a monthly basis or annual, whatever that is from a contractual standpoint with clients, that they are getting much higher multiples. And we did see that. You can see that with service companies, whether it's HVAC, you can see that with security systems companies that have service contracts. You can see that with carpet cleaning. So you might say, oh, well, yeah, I talk to business owners and they say, oh, well, I'm in this industry and I don't have a recurring revenue model. And they might roll their eyes and say, oh, it's hard for me to do. I can't make that happen. And even in retail, people say, oh, that's hard to do. But there are examples out there. So one of the examples I'm going to share with you today in a subscription model business is a flower company, a flower shop. They deliver flowers. What do? Their business model is pretty straightforward. It's all about the inventory and moving the inventory. The inventory for flowers, I think the average, waste it's quite high because flowers have a pretty short shelf life. And what are you trying to do? You're trying to be on a street corner. You're trying to be with high foot traffic. Maybe you have a retail space and you want people to maybe make that impulse buy. Well, regardless of what industry you're in, and part of the thought process on this is to really think about, well, who are your customers and why are they buying from you? And at what frequency are they buying from you? And this flower company did just that. Sanu Panda and Brian Burkhart, they're co-founders of a company called H Bloom. And that's what they did. They segmented their customer list. They segmented their revenue. They understood the frequency of why people were buying. And what they discovered was that hotels and restaurants wanted to have a consistent replenishment of their flowers for their guests. And so what they decided to do was focus on those segments. And they created a subscription model where every 2 weeks, the flowers would be automatically delivered and the client experience that the restaurants and hotels wanted was so much easier. They didn't have to worry about it. So it took something off their mental plate and it gave these two gentlemen a predictable revenue stream. So instead of your average purchase, so the numbers matter. So instead of your average purchase of flowers, what they were seeing was $29 from your average retail customer. Instead, from a lifetime value standpoint, that became more like $4,500. So it was quite significant for these two. So if a flower business can remake itself, I think that all of us can think about that opportunity to create an automatic customer. And there's a difference between reoccurring and recurring. So for me personally, I work with an interior decorator, and maybe, every 3 or 4 months, maybe every 6 months, I'll say, oh, I think I need something, and she'll help me find something. That's reoccurring, where I come back to her, but it's not predictable. Recurring is more predictable, and you probably have some of these subscriptions yourself, whether it's Netflix, or other things that you're using in your work or personal life. And what's nice about that is the predictability of the future cash flows. So in my experience, one of the exercises to do, and what I do with clients, is we look at all their customers and we plot them out on a whiteboard or a virtual whiteboard. And we try to figure out these themes and circle the opportunities for frequency and for monetary value and opportunity, and where to add value for clients. The next driver, and if we think back to Jill at Ruby Receptionist for a second, what she had done in building her proprietary network of this global network of receptionists to answer the phone at any time of day. Think about Thanksgiving in the United States. A lot of people are on vacation, and so, or with their families, they're not answering the phones. And so this network became so important, so differentiated. And that ultimately, got her that valuation that she benefited from. And so you might be familiar with Warren Buffett and how he talks about a competitive moat. Well, what is a moat? Well, it's something deep and wide that's protecting that asset. And that's the way that he describes, one of the ways he looks for companies that he's investing in is how deep and wide their competitive moat is. And so one of the factors that we'll talk about here is what we call monopoly control. So why does this matter? It matters because what buyers buyers of your company, if they're evaluating your company, they're going to leave the meeting and they're going to go in their boardroom and they're going to wonder, could we build this ourselves? If we buy this company, what are we gaining in saving the time and energy to recreate what they've created? How differentiated are they? What is so valuable to us that we're willing to pay, and hopefully even pay a premium for what you've built? And so for Jill, it was her routing technology. And for other companies, what we see is that companies with a monopoly control, where they're truly differentiated in their market, they are getting higher offers. And so again, comparing back to our average multiple across all different regions, quite a jump there in multiples. Another example is Stephanie. Now, Stephanie, I happen to be a customer of Stephanie, and so I just love this example. This is Stephanie Breedlove, and her company, I've literally been a client for probably almost 20 years. So my lifetime value is pretty good with Stephanie. Stephanie Breedlove was a consultant and had a small child, and she wanted to hire a nanny and pay nanny taxes. At the time, her options were pretty limited. ADP, Paychex, companies like that. But she wanted to pay one employee, not an army of employees. She had one employee to pay. There really were no payroll services for nannies at that time that she could find, and she certainly didn't want to do it herself. And I've done it myself, and I can tell you, it is not fun. So she created a company that essentially was about payroll taxes for nannies. And she ended up selling her $9 million company for $54 million. So Stephanie's story is a bit of a juggernaut. There's some really interesting parts to it. One is when she went to sell, she was thinking about selling. She approached a strategic buyer. She approached care.com. Some of you may be familiar with that company. It's a way to find people, caregivers for your children. I think they might even have pet sitters at this point, people to help clean your house. It's essentially an Angie's List for finding care providers. And so at the time, she had about 10,000 customers on her list. And of course, I was one of them. And she had 9 million in revenue. Care.com is pretty big. They're pretty big. And so they have like 7 million subscribers. So her little 10,000, why was that so interesting and compelling to care.com? Well, it was very interesting to them because what she was able to demonstrate was that her small list of 10,000 was a fraction of their 7 million. And what revenue she's able to generate on 10 million, they would be able to then cross-sell and offer that to their base of 7 million subscribers. And so she convinced them, just by showing the math, that it was really to their benefit. She had a moat, she had a competitive differentiation. And so that's what she did. And when she was smaller, though, she faced a crossroads. When she was about 300,000 in revenue, she was trying to consider the path to growth. What was the right path for her to take? And at that time, she thought about two choices. One was, should I sell more stuff to parents? So rewind, for me, what else could I have used? Oh, I could have used a lot of things. I could have used help with finding a dog walker. I could have used help with whatever. There's more stuff to sell to parents. And the other choice she had was to find more parents with a nanny who needed a payroll solution. And so some pundits or consultants might have said to her, oh, this cross-sell opportunity, that's really great. Let's model that out, because it costs 7 times more to get a new client than to sell something to an existing client. So that left side of selling more stuff to parents was pretty tempting. And she did look at that. But ultimately, what she did was she niched down and she focused on this payroll service and finding more parents that had a nanny that needed a payroll solution. And that became her proprietary win. Now, as we look at other factors for growing revenue, the thing we see sometimes we call an owner's trap. And an owner's trap, maybe you can relate to it, because what happens is when we're looking at growth at all costs, and when it's an owner-led organization, the owner is very involved. Owners typically, you might relate to this, that customers by name. You know the names of their wives and husbands, their kids, their dogs. You know them very, very well, and they're great customers. But in order to keep that business, keep it going, you see opportunities, you're entrepreneurial, you start to offer more things. You're getting spread a little thin, but you're the one with the expertise. You're the one that's delivering upon those products and services. And again, you're the one interfacing, and it becomes a trap. So what we see happening is that when you're away, if you're taking vacation, and some people really have not taken a vacation in years, business slows down or business stops. If you're not in the office, if you're not selling, business stops. And customers are coming to you all the time. They're firefighting. They want you to solve their problems. And so what can happen is your revenue plateaus. So how do we escape this trap, this owner's trap? Well, if in the pre-scenario, which is you're selling a lot of things to one customer, what we look to do is create more of a process where you're selling one thing to lots of customers. And that would be the example of Stephanie's business. A lot of companies that are so tied in with the owner that cannot thrive without the owner's involvement, they have a lower valuation. So it can be kind of counterintuitive, where we think, well, the owner's so involved and there's all this loyalty and customer success and customer satisfaction. And we might see some growth, but over time, it's just not sustainable. And if a third party is going to look to acquire the company, or you're going to look to transition your business, it is something that could be holding you back. Another factor that we look at is how likely your customers are to recommend you, and how that comes into play if you're familiar with the Net Promoter Score, something that's an objective measure. So Reichheld was with Bain & Company. He created the Net Promoter Score model. And if you're not familiar with it, you can Google it. There's a lot of material out there. We're going to talk about it a little bit more today. What we see for Net Promoter Score is that customers who are ranking more highly on this objective measure of how their customers value them, they are increasing their value at a higher rate. So it would take an average business, a company that scores in an average way on this Net Promoter Score measure, about 20 years to catch up its top line revenue with where these high performers are. And these are some marquee names you might be familiar with, of course. And there are a lot of companies that are using the Net Promoter Score measure to understand how their customers view them. So how do we measure your Net Promoter Score? Well, quite simply, you might even see this when you check out, whether it's your airline or a hotel, restaurants. You might see this one question of, what's your likelihood to refer our business to a friend or colleague? And it's on a 10-point scale. So what we're looking for is a percent of promoters. A promoter is someone that's going to score you a 9 or a 10. So let's say in theory then this score, we got 25% scored us a 9 or 10. Then we look at the number of passives, or the percentage of passives. Passives are people who are scoring you on a 7 or 8. And so again, we'll say, okay, this is 70% of people. And now we want to know the detractors. So that's everybody else. So that would be scoring you from a 1 to 6. So the math on the net promoter is we take the promoter percentage minus the detractors, and that gets you your Net Promoter Score. We ignore the passives. So for Stephanie, in this real life example, her Net Promoter Score was extremely high. It was a 78%. And I should share with you, on average, in the US, the average Net Promoter Score is 15%. So they were crushing it. 78% is really, really, really strong. How did they do that? Well, the key for Breedlove was their onboarding experience. They knew from a competitive standpoint, the big guys, the ADPs, the paychecks, once you become a client, they're kind of hands off with you. So they took a different approach. It wasn't their differentiation, but it became a really important part of their retention, where customers upfront had such a great experience, and then they referred them to other people, and it really helped build their customer base. The Net Promoter Score is a pretty common measure. You might see a few others out there, but what's important to a company that's evaluating you is they want to see some objective measures of your customer retention, because again, it's going to give them a sense of what that future stream of cash flows is, a reason to believe the strength of your business as you've been discussing it with them. So whether it's venture capitalists, private equity groups, strategic buyers, they are using Net Promoter Score and will understand that as well when you show them your numbers. And for me and working with clients, it is something that I have as a tool, and we use that in our toolkit. The next driver is called the Switzerland structure. So you might recognize this map of Europe. The red area is the country of Switzerland. And so drivers 5, 6, and 7 are all bundled into one thing. And it really boils down to neutrality. So Switzerland, located next to Germany, France, it's a country that is really steeped in neutrality. They're separate from the European Union. They didn't use the euro. And if you go back in history, they didn't enter the world wars. And that's what the Switzerland structure is really about. It's about neutrality, that you're not so dependent on any one customer or any one supplier or any one employee. That employee might be you. So as we were talking about earlier, this challenge, this owner's trap, or this owner's challenge of being so involved in the business can hold your business back because it represents risk. So who owns the customer relationship? We ask this is one of the questions on the Value Builder survey. And we look to learn from how they answered this question in the customer relationship to what their valuation was. And what we find here is that the owners who do not have that personal relationship with their customers, those are the ones that have higher multiples. So the next driver, the final attribute that we're going to talk about today is growth potential. And it's how you can ensure maximum value for your company. Just going beyond the size of your company, the industry that you're in, your revenues, it's about also growth. So I want to, for any of you who are runners, thinking about running in a race. Now, I've run in the Pittsburgh Marathon. I've run in it twice. Once because I didn't finish, I went in the hospital. And the second time I came back because I really wanted to cross that finish line. So I did a relay and I finally crossed the finish line. A couple years later, but regardless, I finished. So having a business, growing a business is like a marathon. And when you cross that finish line and you're transitioning to your next thing, something amazing, that's your finish. But whoever is taking over, that's their starting line. And so whoever's taking over your business, whether they're, again, acquiring it from you or you're transitioning to the next generation, that's their beginning. And so what are you handing over? You're handing over what they believe to be an opportunity for growth. How do we demonstrate what that might be? One of the questions we ask on the survey is, how easy would it be for you to accommodate a 5 times increase in demand? It's a lot. How could your organization absorb that? And organizations that have an easier time to demonstrate that, to demonstrate how they could absorb that increased share, have higher multiples. So this is Rod. And Rod did just that. His story is pretty incredible. He launched a business that was right around the time of Sarbanes-Oxley in the United States, where there was always new regulations and protections, and companies had to do more monitoring of things. So Rod Drury founded a company called Aftermail. And Aftermail sprung up at just the right time. It was something that these companies needed. So he had a $2 million company. How did he have a $2 million company? And it was actually a pretty short period of time. I think it was only 2 years. How did he get to 2 million? Well, he went to some Fortune 500 companies, and he's two actually, and he sold $1 million agreements. So $1 million times 2, that was 2 million. So he had 2 clients and he had $2 million in revenue. Fortune 500 company. Well, how many Fortune 500 companies are there? 498 others. And so Rod faced this decision. Do I go after the other 498 or do I try to sell? And you can see here from what he decided to do. He sold for 35 million. And by the way, he got 15 million up front, which is a pretty good deal. Now, why did this company, Quest, who bought them, why did they choose to go after this company? And why did they pay such a high multiple? Well, Rod was able to demonstrate that there was more field left to plow. These other 498 Fortune 500 companies were also customers of Quest. That was Quest's target market. And they were able to generate quite a return on their investment. So in sort of summarizing here, just what are the 8 things that every business owner should know? What did we talk about today? So 1, industry and size of your company are important, but they're not the only things. 2, recurring revenue is critical. And if you remember, recurring revenue is not the same as reoccurring revenue. And 3, focusing on selling less stuff to more people and having an objective measure of your customer satisfaction. If you use the Net Promoter Score, scoring above a 50% is an attractive place to be, and getting more people to refer you. And reducing reliance on a single customer, employee, and supplier is the Switzerland structure, and maintaining that sense of neutrality and not creating risk in overdependence. And then last but not least, leaving some field left to plow, where you can demonstrate that there's growth potential And so that company that's on the other side of your transaction or on the other side of your transition can see and can understand what opportunity they may have to grow that business should they add you into their portfolio. And so the last thing before we open it up for questions is a special offer. So for any of you who have a business, you want to understand what your value builder score looks like, what it might be, I am offering a free half-hour consult. So you can take the value builder score, go to getmyvbscore.com. You can use that link right there, getmyvbscore.com, and take the survey. It'll take less than 15 minutes. It's confidential. Once it's completed, I'll set up a time to meet with you and we'll go over your results and we'll discuss some strategies for you to increase value in your business. If you don't feel ready for that, that's totally fine. My email is on here as well. Please reach out to me, lbarkman@small.big.com. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. So I'd love to meet you, learn about your business, and see how I might be able to help you with the 8 drivers of value in your company. So thank you. I'm going to open it up for questions. If you have questions, let's use the chat. And let's see. I'm going to stop my screen share. All right. Anyone have any questions?
Hey, Laurie, Dawn here. Thank you for that. That was good. I'm probably not your typical customer. I'm a relationship manager at Citizens, and I deal with not all, but 95% are family-owned businesses. So I always search for good material to help me better serve them. So that was good. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. And Don, if you want to talk offline about how we might partner together on some education events, just let me know. Reach out and we can talk about that.
I reached out to you on LinkedIn, so that was the start. So I appreciate that. And I see you do some stuff with Vista. Do you know Trisha Warwick at all?
No, I have not met her yet. So I'd love an introduction.
Trisha's a Vista's chair here in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
I think you guys would get along pretty well, and it might be somebody to reach out to and meet, especially if you're doing some presentations to those chairs. She's a pretty active group. So.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Debbie, I know you have a question.
I do have a question. I was going to type it and then I decided that could take too long. So, so I liked how you said hope is not a strategy. And you mentioned that 50% of owners don't have a written succession plan. And I've worked at a couple of different companies where we've done strategic planning periodically, but not using your terms in a recurring manner, right? But the world changes, and I imagine strategic plans also need to be adjusted. So when you work with folks, regardless of the industry, how often do you need to take a step back and do another value builder, analysis, or relook your business plan or succession plan to see if you're still on track or if you need to adjust because the world's changed?
I'll answer that question from my own experience, and then I'll answer it also from my, how I work with clients. So when I was a CEO running a business, we started from scratch. So I'll kind of talk from that vantage point. If your business does not have a strategic plan, what does that look like to get started? So at how I work with clients is we start with the Value Builder survey, which is typically an annual exercise. So we baseline you now, and it's great to start with that because we try to understand where the big drivers are. So if there's 8 core drivers of value, when we get back your scores, we're looking at sort of those 2 or 3. Which are the ones that are really going to move the needle? Which are the ones we really need to be focusing on? And how do we prioritize that? And so with the business, if they have a team to, if owners have people around them, some key leaders, it's a great opportunity to involve them for strategic planning. So the process that I use is we do typically a 2-day session. We'll literally map out and create this wonderful document. Now the wonderful document we all feel good about, but the real value is in that team process. And I've seen it over and over again, just the alignment that people get, the understanding of really what's important to the business, which way we headed here, what are our long-term goals. Now, the owner might have some goals that he or she's not going to surface in the planning process, and that's totally appropriate. And that's why, for me and how I work with clients, there's the one-on-one side, and that's where we talk about their personal readiness. So the strategic planning is about the business readiness and getting the business attractiveness and readiness for their future transitions. And again, if it's 3 to 5 years from now, that's great, because a company that wants to transition a year from now doesn't have time to do any of these things. So back to your question. So there's this kickoff process, and we'll do planning. That sort of sets the course. And then typically what I do is quarterly check-ins. So I call them accountability meetings, where it's an opportunity to come back together, update what needs to be updated, celebrate the wins, which is really important because we're making strides on some pretty important things here, and we're also running the business. So the strategic plan for organizations that really do well with execution, and a lot of organizations don't, but organizations that really learn how to execute are finding a way to not make the strategic plan something you only think about, once a quarter, but they're integrating it into tools like Basecamp if they're using that for project management, or they're making it part of their management team, monthly or weekly meetings that they might be having. So it's part of this, it becomes part of the fabric of what they're working on. And so by the time we get to the quarterly meeting, it's like more like an update meeting. So what do we need to change? What are any red flags? Where do we really need help? And more often than not, and what I do with clients is I encourage them to do color coding. So let's do a green for green's on track. Orange means we haven't finished it yet, but we're okay. Red is, wow, we really need to talk about this. So we celebrate what's in the green, kind of hit that quickly, right? We want to spend most of the time on what do we need to change? What do we need to modify? Where do we need help? And I love the quarterly check-ins because the teams are always surprised about how much they're able to accomplish. When they really focus their energies towards this, then they see the momentum. And then the Value Builder score becomes an annual tool that we use, because I think just in expectation setting, Deb, we can't expect that we're going to move this giant mountain in a month. It's just not going to happen. And it's a great way to then have a process, have a structure, and have this sense of accountability to the data to say, okay, well, we want to check in on this and see how we're doing, but we know you can't do it monthly because it's just not, you're not going to check, you're probably, I don't know, maybe you would check your blood pressure every day, but more often than not, you're going to go to the doctor once a year and kind of check in and see how you're doing.
Great. And does that work best with small, mid, or large size companies, like depending on the management structure?
I think for strategic planning, any size organization can use that tool. I have clients that are 4 employees, and I've worked in organizations when I ran my company, and we had 200 plus people. So I think the tool, the process of strategic planning works in any organization. You can even as a team of 1 use it, but it's most effective when you have a team, you have an outside facilitator that's helping you and thinking through the process and leading it so that you as the CEO or owner can participate most effectively. But companies for the Value Builder, I find are, I have clients that are smaller, a million plus, I would say, can really most benefit from the Value Builder system. I don't know of Value Builder advisors using it with startups, but it could work. But I think for business owners that are $1 million plus in revenue, that have been in business for 3 to 5 years, typically my clients, they're privately held, they're not venture backed. And again, they might be family owned or closely held types of companies, any industry that wants to grow, any industry or company that wants to continue to create value.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, we'll stop for now. Thank you so much. Please be in touch. I look forward to connecting with all of you. And again, the URL, if you're interested in getting your Value Builder score, is getmyvbscore.com. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.